Chapter 6. Skinned and Buried. Barney was up the elm tree. It was the one that grew very close to Grandmother's house. It had a swing on one of the lower branches, and near the top there was a hole where the jackdaws usually made a nest each year. Barney had climbed up to see how they were getting on this spring, and they had already laid one egg. He climbed higher among the springy branches at the top, and clung there and let the wind blow him to and fro. He could see the house almost below him, and the garden with a few daffodils and crocuses showing, and the wood and the copses where the trees still showed their bones, but were beginning to cover them with new green leaves. He heard Lou's voice somewhere about the house calling for him, but he didn't answer. "Bet she can't find me," he thought, and grinned to himself. Then he saw his grandmother and Lou in the yard, going out to the car with shopping baskets. Grandmother called, "Barney, where are you?" Barney chuckled to himself. He could see them, so they could see him if they really looked. But Grandmother and Lou got into the car and drove off, and he could see it going away along the lanes towards the village. They'd gone off shopping and left him. It wasn't fair. He was so cross that he nearly fell off his branch. Then he thought it was no good trying to stamp your feet when they are wedged in the fork of a branch, and anyhow he might as well stay up here instead of going shopping. He'd rather be up a tree in the wind than go shopping. He could see ploughed fields with a tractor crawling over the bare earth, pulling a harrow. He could see black and white cows on the pasture. He could see chicken houses, and those very small bits of yellow like grains of sand running about must be baby chicks. He could see a big black car coming along the lane towards the house. That was funny. It had stopped and pulled off the road into the copse near the chalk pit. He could see two men get out and walk towards the house. They wore dark hats and mackintoshes and didn't look like country people. Had he seen them before? Yes, he had. They had come to the door once before, and he had answered the doorbell. They had asked him if his grandmother had got any silver or jewels to sell, and he had told them that of course Grandmother had lots of silver and jewels, but he didn't think she would want to sell them as she'd got some money already. And then Grandmother had come out and told them she didn't want to sell anything, thank you, and if she did, she wouldn't sell it on the doorstep, and she had seemed quite cross. And now the men were coming back again. Well, there was nobody at home, and he was going to stay in his tree. One of the men stayed in the lane, and the other went and knocked on the door. Of course nobody answered. The man knocked again and waited a long time. Then he went round the back and tried that. It was not locked. The man looked about him, opened the door and went in. Barney's heart fluttered and his legs felt funny, as if they had nearly fallen off the branch, and though he was clinging on with all his might, that man had gone into Granny's house when he shouldn't have. He must be a thief. He would take all the silver and drive off with it in his car. And Barney was all alone up in the tree, and though he could see the countryside for miles around, he couldn't see a human being except the tractor driver, fields and fields away. There was no one who could help in time. Yes, there was. Barney started to climb down, trying not to be too shaky and excited. He had to go down the side of the tree that was away from the house so that he wouldn't be seen. And the best handholds and footholds were on the house side. Barney slipped and slithered the last bit and landed among the bushy twigs that grew out of the bottom of the trunk. He crouched there for a few moments, hoping he had not made too much noise. Then he crawled out and ran as hard as he could across the paddock towards the copse. He scrambled over the fence and lay among the brambles there, panting and looking towards the house. He could see no signs of anyone coming after him, so he got up and plunged through the copse. "Look out, bluebells and primroses," he thought. "I'm in a hurry." By the time he got down into the pit and along the bottom to Stig's cave, he was quite out of breath. Stig was there all right. There was a strong smell coming from something gluey he was melting on the fire. He was sticking arrowheads onto their shafts and binding them with catgut, which he was taking from a broken old tennis racket. He looked all ready for the spring hunting season. "Stig!" puffed Barney. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. You've got to help. A man's got into Granny's house, and I'm sure he's a thief, and he'll take all the silver and jewels, and even my money box, if he finds it. And if he's got it, it's 3 and 3 in it. What are we going to do, Stig?" Stig just grinned in a friendly way, and Barney began to feel hopeless. It was just like when he was trying to explain about Stig to the grown-ups. They just smiled and said, "Really?" And, of course, Stig didn't speak English. He didn't talk at all much, but he must make him understand. "Enemy," said Barney fiercely, pointing towards the top of the cliff. "Bad men," he said, screwing up his face to look wicked. "Fight 'em, Stig. Shoot 'em. See 'em off, Stig," he urged, making bow and arrow movements and spear movements with his arms. Stig seemed to get the idea. He grinned more than ever and scowled horribly at the same time. Barney looked around for the new-looking bow and the arrows that Stig had been making, some spears, an axe, and the horrible-looking club. Barney picked up the bow and arrows and handed them to Stig. But Stig gave them back to him and took the club instead. "Can I really have the bow and arrow, Stig?" exclaimed Barney. "Gosh, thanks. Come on, we've got to be quick." They ran out of the far end of the pit, and instead of turning right and coming back through the copse to the garden, Barney led the way round into the lane and up the hill towards the house. There at the top, where the lane passed near the chalk cliff, and there was a gap where lorries backed off the road to dump things over the cliff, they found the big black car parked. And there, coming along the lane, were the 2 men in raincoats and dark hats, carrying a large suitcase each. Without thinking, Barney fitted an arrow into the bow and shot it. A dark city hat flipped off one of the men and was pinned to the bank of the lane by a flint-tipped arrow. The man stopped, and then they saw Barney. "Now then, kid," said the man, "cut it out. That's dangerous, playing with bows and arrows." "You're thieves," said Barney. "I know you've got Granny's silver in that suitcase." The man looked at his companion. "Hear that?" he said. "The kid thinks we're thieves. Look, Sonny, we've come to look at your Granny's television. Didn't we, Sidney? We got our tools in here, in these cases. Haven't we, Sidney?" "That's right," said Sidney. "Plucky little nipper though, ain't he? Sidney? Looking after his Granny's house while she's away, eh, Sonny? I got some toffees for you in that car." "I don't like toffees," said Barney. But he was beginning to feel foolish, and he lowered the bow, which he was pointing at the man, with another arrow fitted. The man turned round for his hat, which had the arrow stuck through it. He pulled the arrow out, and then he looked at the sharp flint tip, and his face went white. "You little horror," he snarled at Barney. "Where'd you get these things from, eh? You know you might have killed me." And he broke the arrow across twice and threw the pieces angrily on the ground. "Come on," he said, "and a hand. Hand over the rest of those things, or there will be trouble." He came towards Barney with a very nasty expression on his face. Stig had been lurking behind the car, listening to the strange talking and wondering what it was all about. When he saw the man break his precious arrow and come angrily towards Barney, it was enough for him. He let out a sound that was something between a growl and a howl and dashed at the man, raising his horrible club. The two men took one look at this wild figure, dropped their suitcases and ran, with Stig in mad pursuit and Barney running after Stig. "Stig! Stig! Come back!" shouted Barney. "It's all a mistake. They're not bad men. They're not thieves. They just came to mend the television." But it was no use. What did Stig know about television? There was a barbed wire fence at the top of the lane, and the men decided to get over it in the hope of escaping from Stig. As the second one scrambled over, his raincoat got caught in the wire. In a panic, he struggled out of the coat and ran over the field, leaving it on the fence. It was this that saved him from the teeth of Stig's club, because Stig stopped to look at the coat, as if he was not quite sure what part of himself the man had left behind. Barney caught up with him and took hold of his arm. "Stig, Stig! You mustn't chase those men," Barney panted. "I thought they were thieves, but they're not. They might tell a policeman, and then there'll be awful trouble." But Stig was looking at the coat. As he turned it about, there was a tinkling sound and a whole lot of shining. Things fell out of a pocket and onto the ground. Stig pounced on them with wide open eyes, picked them up and admired them, turning them into the light. "No, Stig," said Barney, "you can't have them. They're only the man's teaspoons. I expect he was going to have a picnic. Hey, just a minute." Barney pulled Stig by the arm. "Come on," he urged. "We'd better look at those suitcases." And they ran back down to the lane where the suitcases were lying. Barney opened one of them. "Golly!" he exclaimed. "All Granny's spoons and forks and ladles and things, her jewels and her trinkets from her dressing table, one pair of her cufflinks belonging to Grandfather, and his own money box." He shook the money box. Did it still sound like 3 shillings and 3 pence?